colonialism and eurocentrism. Then why do we have the bull? Some people try to claim that we do not have a problem with racism in the United States.
There's one more important area where our president is right. He knows that political correctness and cancel culture are dangerous and just plain wrong. In much of the Democratic Party, it's now fashionable to say that America is racist. That is a lie. America is not a racist country. This is personal for me. I am the proud daughter of Indian immigrants. They came to America and settled in a small southern town. My father wore a turban. My mother wore a sari. I was a brown girl in a black and white world. We faced discrimination and hardship, but my parents never gave in to grievance and hate.
Well, is discrimination not a result of experiencing racism? This was child of Sikh Indian immigrants Nimrata Niki Randhawa, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, a guest speaker during the Republican National Convention 2020. But unless you researched her, you would not know this is her real name because she decided that she needed to change it to Nikki Haley when she went into politics. In 2001, Haley also identified as white on her voter registration card. If there's no racism in the United States, if there is no preference for white American culture and America is not a racist country like Haley claims, why does she herself feel like assimilation and throwing her own cultural heritage and identity aside is the only way to truly embrace and be embraced by the United States Republican politics? Why do Latinos also feel like they must keep their identity on the down low or not be too openly Latino or Mexican to be accepted? Can this be related to how hard it is to find representations of Latinos in the media which are not ridiculing, minimizing, or exoticizing our identity? Personally, I believe the Democratic Party has a record of upholding white supremacy as much as the Republicans. So her reference to the Democratic Party claiming this, of course, creates further dissonance. Binary thinking is part of the logic of coloniality, after all. When people exist in this dissonance, or in a lack of harmony between their thoughts and beliefs and what they actually experience in everyday life, where there's concrete evidence to prove the opposite of what they claim, I am reminded of this Simpsons moment.
Santa's little helper? Guess I was the only one who loved him.
You got that right. Remember the time he ate my goldfish and you lied to me and said I never had any goldfish? But why'd I have the bowl, Bart? Why did I have the bowl?
Yeah, Bart. Why did he have the bowl? Maybe we should go back and begin with the issue that many people still do not quite understand racism, what it is, and what it can be.
Me gusta el sol. La mujer cuando llora, las golondrinas y las malas señoras, abrir balcones y abrir las ventanas, y las muchachas en abril.
People have been convinced that racism can only occur when physical and overt harm is being inflicted upon people of color. They need to see whipping, overt humanization, murder, lynchings, slavery, rape. Clear signs that say, no Mexicans, no blacks, no dogs allowed. Let us also not forget the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which would completely ban and forbid any Chinese labor immigration, even after they had been forced to backbreaking labor and inhumane treatment while building the railroads. Today, Asians are regarded as the model minority, but this is on the grounds of tokenism. Tokenism refers to when one person or group is taken as an example to say, See, look how we treat them. And we're not racist. We are inclusive. They made it. Why not you? This apparent preference comes at the price of having Asians represented as effeminate, weak, exotic, and submissive to white people and culture. This, as you can see, is simply another form of racism. Another reason why Asians have a different experience is because of their relation as immigrants to these lands. They were not invaded within America, and for the most part, they were brought by force of enslavement in the 1880s. What is most interesting is that many people who identify as white today were also victims of the overt racism that helped fund the white supremacist United States. These groups included Irish, Germans, Italians, and Jews. In his 1952 book, Afro-Caribbean psychoanalyst and intellectual Frantz Fanon points out that in the case of Jews, the only difference between black people and Jewish people is that the Jewish people can pass as white, so they can partake in the white wages that Frederick Douglass wrote about. One key moment in which race became pivotal was when both black and white laborers were uniting against their oppressors in the 1880s. Whiteness was used as a wage to separate the laborers that were white because they were allowed to vote and own property. Where a white laborer could say, "I'm enslaved too, but hey, at least I'm white." This further sealed the racial divisions that we see until this day. White wages make it possible for example, Latinx who are perceived to be white to benefit from the wages of whiteness, even when they themselves are not white. White wages have made it possible for other non-whites to act as if they were white, and they themselves become then perpetrators of the supremacy of whiteness. This is done through what Frantz Fanon referred to as the logic of coloniality. Racism exists in multiple dimensions as it is a type of logic, a hierarchical organization of skin color and ethnicity. This organization is not scientific, it is merely imaginary. Yet, the imagination and the logic behind the organization of the races enabled and justified inhumane practices that led to the global rise in privilege of white Western culture and peoples and their subsequent attempt for global domination. In the context of the Americas and the arrivals of white Western Europeans, these hierarchical notions find their roots in colonialism. One of the most impactful events in the history of the American continent was the forceful settlement of Western Europeans in American Indian lands and the genocide of indigenous and African people through violent conquest. In the context of the Americas, colonialism was the practice of white Western Europeans subjugating indigenous African people and Asian people into slavery, all of which, I must add, Latinx are part of or descendants. Colonialism was pushed forth through the guise of bringing civilization to cultures which already had their own forms of civilization and which yet were invisible to the colonial eye due to their centralization on their own ways and understandings. Coloniality deals with the way in which these perspectives from colonialism continue to shape our social structures and institutions through a Eurocentric lens that is also white supremacist. All approaches to the foundation of American nations and their institutions were based on the ideals and racial, cultural hierarchies invented during colonialism. In turn, this perverse logic was used to shape the structures for economics, politics, education, religion, law in a way that made sense to them, empowered them and their children, while marginalizing and oppressing those belonging or affiliated with Black and Indigenous people, as well as Asian people and their descendants. Not much has been done to revisit and attempt to reconfigure these structures. What is most alarming is the fact that our knowledge and understanding of the impact of colonization, even though immense and significant, has remained minimal, if not null. Why have we as people of the Americas, why have we been denied the context of our making and the details of our colonial past, if in fact it was not so bad? White supremacy requires certain norms and ideals to drench the fabric of society for it to be upheld. White supremacy is like a monstrous fish that requires the waters of coloniality from the Sea of Europe, because this way of living is in fact an extension or a proxy of European organization, or again, what Fanon referred to as the perverse logic, a cosmovision, a way of seeing, understanding, and organizing the world, inherited and maintained through the impact of the hierarchical division of peoples during colonialism, based not only on skin color, but also on culture, language, religion, race, gender, sexuality, abilities, etc. The fishbowl is a container, or all of the institutions that allow for that water, that perverse logic to remain contained in a certain shape. The fish who swim in that water become so used to the water that they do not even perceive it. They do not even question it. But as you know, to some fish, that water does not have the necessary pH or potential of hydrogen for them to thrive. If you know about aquariums, you know that you need to have the proper pH depending on the type of fish you want to survive. So it's basically like you're bringing fish from another ocean and you're turning the sea they're coming into the sea they left behind. This is detrimental to the life that used to thrive and live in that sea. Coloniality does not care that this happens. In fact, it even longs for the other life to go away and disappear. Today, there is so much confusion about what the bowl is. In fact, the existence of the bowl itself is questioned. There is also very little understanding about the water itself. If there is no hierarchy to be maintained, then why do we have the bowl, the water, and the unhealthy pH? Why is racism institutionalized? For example, why is the percentage of brown and black people stopped, harassed, and murdered by police so much greater? Why have we not learned about our indigenous history in the context of colonialism in the United States and its formation? Why do some Latinos and Mexicans have no idea that they're indigenous and or black? Why have we not been allowed to be our Mexican or Latinx selves without the requirement of assimilation? Why has speaking Spanish and being too proud to be Mexican been reasons for us to get lynched? Why is it that in a Hispanic serving institution, this is the only opportunity you get to hear about these facts? Why is Latinx media and culture a niche and optional topic? Yes, why? Oh, why do we have the bowl? Which in our case would refer to the institutionalized racism which pushes people like Nikki Haley to change their name, culture, and even their religion for the purposes of assimilation, acceptance, and a little bit of a chance, an opportunity. Why do we have this hierarchical preference for whiteness and white Western Eurocentric ideals embedded in all of our institutions? Why would people be offended by this video? Why would some feel compelled to shut me down? These are important questions that you need to understand in order to move forward in understanding why it is that Latinos are continuously ill-represented, disrespected, and dehumanized in the United States mass media.
No soy de aquí, soy de allá. No tengo edad ni por venir y ser feliz. Es mi color de identidad. No soy de aquí ni soy de allá.
All this did not just happen in the Americas. It happens in all countries around the world with a history of settler colonialism and imperialism. What we see occurring today is part of the legacy of colonization and its undying zombie form, coloniality. The way we are represented in mass media is directly tied to how we are treated, the way we experience life, and what is possible for us as a people. To learn about Latinx representations and their origins founded in coloniality is to learn what needs to be changed and what needs to be revised, rewritten, and produced.
No soy de aquí, soy de allá.
How will you contribute to this much needed change?
Es mi color de identidad. No soy de aquí ni soy de allá. No tengo edad ni por venir y ser feliz es mi color de identidad.